So I've been continually asking people at the end of, during the Devo time after the movie that we watched the previous Sunday, because we can't give the movies away.
Yes.
Now we can.
Yeah.
Because we're done. But
Yeah.
that's okay. The question that I had been asking was, whether you, where you were when you saw this movie, how old were you, that kind of stuff. Well, this movie's not very old. And not everybody saw it in the theater. So I'm going to change the question up a little bit. This was a movie, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, that dealt with Mr. Rogers. So I'm going to go there instead with you, Chris Kiger.
Yes.
And I'm going to go ahead and say it. Part of the reason that you're on here with me is you're old.
Yes.
And so that it fits.
I've seen this show
Exactly.
many times.
So what is your memory of Mr. Rogers kind of in your childhood years, growing up, if you watched it, that kind of thing?
Okay. The sweater, him putting the sweater on and wearing a sweater in his house as a way to dress down. The whole taking off of the shoes, and that always gave me anxiety, like he wouldn't finish.
Even Tom Hanks yesterday during the movie, I was like, he's not going to get it done in time. I had the same thing.
The stoplight was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he would go into I guess it was like the kitchenette, he would get the neighborhood of make-believe, the figures out. I was like, I want that.
Yeah.
And then all I could think of was the cat. And that would go, meow, 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 meow.
And it was perfectly okay. None of us thought that was corny at all. We were just like, that's so hilarious.
Yes.
Yeah. It didn't dawn on me. I always paid attention to it being King Friday.
Yes.
And until I listened yesterday as an adult, it didn't strike me that it was always King Friday the 13th, which I thought was funny.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so I thought that was funny. Anyway, there's our Mr. Rogers insight for the day. Okay, We've got more coming.
Yes. Okay, good.
Did you know he was a Christian?
I did not.
Yeah. So, provided that Tom Hanks was portraying Mr. Rogers off the TV set correctly, which I think from everything I've read, and I did a pretty good amount of research on Mr. Rogers, I think it's fair to say that what you saw on screen was very similar to who the man was in real life. Mm-hmm. How does it hit you to see that he was that kind of same person off the small screen than he was on the small screen?
Okay, I grew up in a bubble.
Okay.
So, and my personality is to always trust people.
Okay, yep.
So when I saw him on screen, I just believed that's the way he was all the time.
Yeah.
But I can tell you right now that Johnny Bench ruined that for me, and another person whose name I can't think of right now. But I assumed that that's the way they are all the time. Right. And then when I met them off, it was like, ooh, they're not that way.
Not as superstar-y
and it was like, wow.
As I was hoping.
I forgot who the other person was, or somebody else.
Yeah. But you had that shattered a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that currently, with all of the internet has a lot to do with this, but all the information that you learn about stars and all that kind of you just never. I almost now am way more on the cynical side, where I just assume there's no way anybody is as nice as any character that they ever play on TV or movies or whatever.
Correct.
Well, Mr. Rogers had 895 episodes of his show, which is a lot. Wow. He was doing the work of sharing and using television as a medium to kind of share the message of the way of life that he felt like people ought to have. And from a national audience perspective, it was probably different parts of the country probably received that differently. He actually had been doing a small-time show that kind of became national because PBS picked it up and those kinds of things. Doing my research on Mr. Rogers, what I discovered I thought was kind of interesting. He was actually an ordained minister, which is interesting to me. Yeah. It was long before, jumping on the internet where you could become an ordained minister and do a wedding. because your friends want you to marry him. This was a process that he had to kind of go through. And not only did he have to go through it to become an ordained minister, but the denomination that he was a part of, he had to go and appear before the board on I think every few years to kind of maintain his ordination. And he wanted to do that. He always wanted to kind of maintain that. He was originally going to seminary. This goes all the way back in the 50s, where he was going to go to seminary and become a minister. Kind of got captivated by what he saw on television. Not so much that he thought it was great, it's that he thought it was not great. And felt like there needed to be a moral compass being presented on TV. And so he started his little, it was actually a puppeteering show at one point. It wasn't the whole, walk down the stairs coming in from, we were having this discussion, whether he's coming in from work or we don't know.
It was just odd.
It's very odd. When you think back on it, I'm not sure what he was doing. But anyway, it became a national thing that got picked up. And somebody came along to him and said, you're so great with kids. And they saw him off camera with kids. We should be able to capture that in front of the camera. And so they asked him to stop doing the puppeteering part, because he was the guy behind that was doing all the puppeteering, and get out in front of the camera so that he could interact with the people on the other side of the camera, which is pretty amazing. When you think about Mr. Rogers, what are the ways that, there's another conversation that there's been all kinds of parodies about Mr. Rogers that pop into our head. But when you think about the real Mr. Rogers and what you felt about Mr. Rogers, or maybe even feel about Mr. Rogers, what are the ways that you would describe him?
Okay, so in our world today, when you see a dad or a man portrayed on TV, they're crude, they're, I can't think of the other words now, crude, dumb, or maybe feminine. Mr. Rogers was none of those. And it always felt like on his shows he was talking to me. I don't know, but it just felt like there was a vested interest in whoever was watching, and there was always hope and encouragement. And you don't see that today.
No.
And I've even wondered too, if he came out with his show today,
I don't even know if it would go in the air. They wouldn't be satisfied.
No.
Two things that you said that just kind of sparked something. For one, is that moment, and we showed it, that was in the movie, that we showed it in the service on Sunday, when he asks Lloyd to take a minute and think about all the people who made him who he is. In that minute, as it was portrayed in the movie, they actually have Tom Hanks kind of turn and break the fourth wall a little bit and look into the camera. And look at us. Not Lloyd, but us. Mr. Rogers did that.
Yes, he did.
There were so many times you'd watch on TV and it was like, I'm the only person in the room. He's talking to me. And so that was kind of a cool moment that we and in service yesterday, both services did the same thing. I mean, you could have heard a pin drop during that moment.
And he wasn't creepy either.
No. Which is hard to,
in our day and age, it would be like, whoa.
Well, I'm not sure that going into this series, I was super confident of how I was going to grab spiritual truth in some of these movies. But the comparison between Mr. Rogers and Jesus was always kind of there. Those characteristics, those traits that we've kind of talked about. I think that last one we just hit is kind of an interesting one, that he was Jesus was everything he was, and yet somehow not creepy. I think that's an interesting little moment, because there's a lot of ways you could look at some of the encounters we have for us in Scripture and think, ooh, that could have been a really creepy thing, but somehow it wasn't. Anyway, he does have these characteristics, these traits that remind us of Jesus. But Mr. Rogers had some people, some situations that were difficult, that were exhausting for him, just like we do. I mean, we have people who are difficult for us. I think about that kid that was swinging the sword in front of him. He was so patient with him. And so, even the parents were getting frustrated. And he was just kind of waiting and trying to navigate his way into that kid's life. And I feel like Jesus did that, and I feel like I don't. So I'm not going to ask you to air your dirty laundry, but there are people, there are situations, there are circumstances that are difficult, infuriating, exhausting, relentless. I mean, all these words fit, at least for me. They don't always lead to compassion and forgiveness and patience from me. How about you?
I just want to have a closing prayer and not talk about this.
I get it.
Because I've had an example today where
Sure.
I did not handle a situation, and it was selfish, and I had to apologize.
Right.
But yes, you said it, and a lot of times for me, if I'm hungry and tired,
Yeah.
I'm not a pleasant person to be around.
Snickers understands their whole marketing thing. You're just not yourself.
Yes.
It's real.
Yes.
And that's, I mean, not to make excuses,
No.
but that is a very real thing.
Yes, and a lot of times it depends on who it is that's causing me bitterness, what time of the day, what's going on. Because I'm the type of person, when I'm doing something, I don't like to be interrupted
Sure.
if I'm really into it.
Right.
And
Well,
that's what happened. It was like,
And especially we have moments, and I think this goes for everybody, but especially in ministry, you can kind of get into something and,
Yes.
and you knew that it was kind of a special zone moment that you're
Yes.
in, and you know that to get back there is going to be a lot, and so you just don't interrupt me
Yes.
right now. I can't be interrupted right
Yes.
now. I get all that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, I can relate to what the Hebrew writer that we looked at on Sunday, what he wrote. Watch out that no bitterness takes root among you, for as it springs up, it causes deep trouble, hurting many in their spiritual lives. Bitterness pops up maybe more regularly in me now than it ever has before, and I don't know what to do about that sometimes. It's frustrating, it's infuriating, and then very quickly it can turn inward where I become frustrated and infuriated
Yes.
at me for letting that bitterness do that to me.
yes.
Anyway,
I'm with you.
I'm assuming you can relate to that. So how do
Can.
you deal with bitterness when it pops up?
When I hear the word bitterness, I think of a very nice lady from our church who I wanted to punch one day when she said, choose to be better, not bitter. And that's when I wanted to throttle her. But she was right on the money.
Yeah.
And I think about scriptures like God causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, sends
Yeah.
rain on the righteous and the unrighteous, and I'm spouting scripture.
Right.
But I look and think, bitterness is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to come.
But how real
You
is
have a
that?
choice.
How real is that statement? Because we would share it really with anyone that frustrates us because we see them make a poor decision. We
Yes.
would just want to say to them, be better.
Yes.
Just be better than that. Just I can sit here and understand why you chose to do it that way.
Yes.
But sitting over here now with
Yes.
hindsight being 2020, be better next time. How many times would we say that to ourselves?
And I think, too, if we choose better, it's going to be better.
Yeah.
It's going to be better, way better.
Yeah.
And if you choose bitterness, you're just going to be miserable.
Yeah. And I'm plenty good at that, but it's never served me well.
Correct.
Yeah. So overcoming bitterness in some cases becomes the first step towards having compassion for somebody, having love and forgiveness for somebody. But it is a big step over bitterness sometimes.
Yes.
Bitterness becomes a barrier, and it can become such a barrier that you can't even get on to another step.
Right,
Because you're
right.
just so caught up in it.
Yes.
So as painful as it may seem, what we're kind of sitting here talking about is we need to be better.
Yes.
And we need to kind of stay away from the bitterness. And when we feel it rising up in us, we got to find a way to squelch it. As Mr. Rogers says, there's always something that you can do with the mad that's in you.
Right.
And you don't have to have it consume you, even though I do think that sometimes we get into a place where we want it to consume us.
Yes.
We think we'll be better off if it
Right.
consumes us, and it never turns out to be the case. So be better, not bitter. I don't love that phrase, but it's true.
It's
Doggone it.
absolutely.
Well, that is our time of continuing the conversation for today. And we just want to remind you, we are right back with services 9:30 and 11 o'clock this Sunday. We start into a brand new series, and without going too deep into it, we're going to be looking at the book of Psalms, which before you go ahead and decide that I'm not interested in Psalms, I get that. I'm not a poetry person myself, but I've discovered some help that has really opened up the Psalms to be very meaningful to me, and I'm going to share that with you over these next few weeks as we go through November. So I hope that you'll be with us this Sunday. 9:30, 11 o'clock. It's Baptism Sunday. We were just talking earlier about a lot of baptisms that are already planned for this week, and maybe that's something that you want to do, and we would encourage you to let us know. You can go on the app and click on the At the Movies button, and you'll be able to sign up for Baptism Sunday. Or if you don't sign up, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just come and be with us, and when the invitation time comes, you can say, hey, I want to be baptized. So we'll make that happen. So we hope you'll be here this week, and we will see you Sunday for service and back for devotions on Tuesday. Have a great rest of the week.